Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for inviting me to participate. I would be so blessed to be on your committee, but I serve on House Judiciary, on Armed Services, and on the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Before I got to Congress, I spent 20 years in the courts defending free speech, religious freedom, and the like, so this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and it's also near and dear to the hearts of our constituents. When I'm back home in my district holding town halls, probably the first or second question I get in every open forum is, can we trust our election system? And this is no game, and we all know that it's one of the most pressing issues that we have because America's trust in our institutions is wavering. It's at all-time lows, and if we don't have this, you can't maintain a constitutional republic. So here's the problem that our constituents can see with their own eyes, that it's become common practice now for various groups and even federal agencies to pursue retribution against Americans for simply exercising their First Amendment right to participate in the political process. In the Weaponization Committee, we have uncovered alarming information about, for example, the IRS targeting conservative groups, you know, the name and shame tactics of the radical left. We know that none other than the FBI itself quite literally colluded with the social media platforms during the last 2 election cycles to censor and silence viewpoints they disagreed with. This is un-American activity, and it's deeply concerning. There's also a lot of confusion about the law. So let me just ask Mr. Smith first. For about a half century, the Supreme Court has been crystal clear that spending money in the context of political activities qualifies as protected speech under the First Amendment. Can you briefly describe, just for the record today, why that is?
Sure. It's one of those things, you know, if you ask the average person, is money speech? Of course, they say no. And the Supreme Court doesn't say that money is speech. As you put it, they say that spending money affects speech. So let's imagine we said, well, the New York Times can't spend more than $3,300 a year to publish, which is the amount, you know, an individual can give to a campaign. It would be a very small newspaper very, very quickly. To communicate with a large audience, you know, you have to spend money. Or let's suppose that we said, well, you have freedom of religion, but you can't spend any money to build a church or buy hymnals or pay a pastor. Clearly that would impact the First Amendment freedom of religion. It's the same thing with speech.
Yeah, because a candidate or an advocacy group obviously can't get their message out without spending money. This is the way it works. That's reality. And isn't it true also that the Supreme Court has also said that the only constitutional basis for restricting money in politics is to prevent a quid pro corruption or the appearance of that? Isn't that right?
That's correct. And sometimes people say that the appearance of corruption is sort of just anything people think is corrupt about the government. They spend too much money, you know, but it's not. By corruption, the court was very clear, it meant the appearance of, as you put it, quid pro quo corruption.
And every, I mean, we've had justices on the right and the left acknowledge this and agree with it, and embrace it. Every election cycle, we hear about the pernicious effects of Citizens United. It's like a curse word now on, you know, on the left. But didn't that decision simply reaffirm basic First Amendment law that corporations have a First Amendment right to speak on political issues?
I agree, it did. And I also want to point out that on the disclosure side, that dealt only with express advocacy of election or defeat of candidates. That was the issue there. So that was not some broad license to pass anything you want to call disclosure and say you can interfere with people's privacy.
And here's an interesting footnote. Isn't it true that during the Citizens United oral argument, the Obama administration actually argued before the Supreme Court that it had the authority to ban books, movies, and speech that if it was made close to an election?
Yes, even one line.
Ms. Dillon, I wish I had more time, but let me ask you real quickly. Could you briefly describe some of the litigation that you've been involved in that relates to the government telling private businesses to censor viewpoints the government sees as wrong or dangerous?
Well, one example, thank you for your question. One example is the case of Rogan O'Hanley, who was banned from social media for questioning the number of votes that President Biden received, and even posting a photograph of barbed wire around the Capitol, and highlighting the irregularities, multiple irregularities in the 2020 election. And he is just one of hundreds that we know of in California, and we've since learned that there were thousands nationally. And I think the most chilling thing to me was learning that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which comes from a government that regulates these companies. So a company is not free to simply say yes or no or take a meeting with the FBI when the FBI asks you to do something. And so that chilling effect, I think, has really has been highlighted thanks to a change in control at Twitter. Without the change in control at Twitter, we never would have learned the extent to which our federal government is threatening the freedom of American citizens to speak freely on an election.
Exactly right. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I yield back.